נקבצו עליי עזבים מחשמנים ופרצו חומות מגדליי ודימו כל השמנים אויבנים נקבצו עליי עזבים מחשמנים ופרצו חומות מגדליי ודימו כל השמנים ומינות על קנקנים נעשה נס לשושנים בימי בינה ימי שמונה כבוש ירדנני ומינות על קנקנים נעשה נס לשושנים בימי בינה ימי שמונה כבוש ירדנני על הניסים ועל הפורגן ולגבורות ולתשועות ולמלחמות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה על הניסים ועל הפורגן ולגבורות ולתשועות ולמלחמות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה על הניסים ועל הפורגן ולגבורות ולתשועות ולמלחמות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה
סביבון סוף 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 חנוכה הוא חג טוב חנוכה הוא חג טוב סביבון סוף 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 חג שמחה עולם נס גדול היה שם נס גדול היה שם חג שמחה עולם
מי יבלל גבורות ישראל אותם נבנה הם בחולו יקום בגיבור גורל עם מי יבלל גבורות ישראל אותם נבנה הם בחולו יקום בגיבור גורל עם שמע בימים ההם בזמן הזה מכבי הושיע ופודה ובימינו כל עם ישראל יתאחד יקום ויגאל
Hello everyone, welcome. Shalom, good afternoon, Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach, we're on Hanukkah, 4th day of Hanukkah. Beautiful holiday. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful holiday. I hope you are celebrating the way Hanukkah deserves to be celebrated. And I know I'm a little early today. I usually start a counter at 12. I was playing with the computer and I just hit the start streaming and I said, oh no, people will probably still be, I don't know. I hope I didn't start too soon. So anyway, you know that I like to chat at the beginning anyway, while we give a little bit more time some people to make it to the class. Who is here? Shelly Chotinov is here. She said Chag Sameach, Rabbi and all. John, son of David, greeting and happy Hanukkah. Keridwen Nord is here saying happy Hanukkah as well. Welcome, Keridwen. Nice to see that you connected to the Torah class. You know that it's a mitzvah to study Torah. It's one of the 613 commandments. Specifically, the rabbis legislated that the way we do it, the way we fulfill with this mitzvah is to dedicate a time to study Torah. So, for example, if you dedicate every Thursday for an hour to study Torah, you are fulfilling with the mitzvah of studying Torah, which is great. It's a great thing. As we are going to see today, the Torah has very little to do with God and a lot to do with us. The Torah was not revealed for God's sake. It was revealed for our own sake. God doesn't need perfection. We need perfection. We need to improve ourselves. God is already perfect. We are not. We have lots of flaws. So that's why we have Torah. And we know now, by now, I believe science proved the rabbis right that if you want to improve your chances of success, then you have to create good habits. Habits can make you or break you. Because habits could be good habits, or could be bad habits. Hello, Andrea. Happy Hanukkah. Hanukkah with a J for you in Spanish, right? Hanukkah. You spell it the same way that I spell it. And in English, you also have the whole thing. How do you spell Hanukkah? There are like 1,000 ways to spell Hanukkah. It's, yeah. Well, as I was saying, the Torah is for us, is for our own benefit. And I hope you understand that by now. Feliz Hanukkah. Yes, very good. Actually, the accent should be in the last A. Chanukah. Hanukkah. That's the Sephardic pronunciation, the way we say it. Hanukkah is more in North America. They put always the accent and second last syllable. We put it all most of the time at the ends. It's Hanukkah. Feliz Hanukkah. Yeah. So, who else is here? So today we are going to continue studying Hanukkah. I almost created a class based on this week's Parsha. Almost. But then I said, no, I have so much more that I want to share with you about Hanukkah. That one class, because last class was all the technicalities of Hanukkah. How do we celebrate Hanukkah? A little bit of the why, but mostly of the how. And I want to go more into detail on making this Hanukkah more meaningful if we understand some of the symbolisms of Hanukkah and how to get inspired by them. For example, we know, and I explained last week, how to light the menorah. And we studied a little bit of the historical evolution or how it went from a single candle to multiple candles, and it's all good. But at the end of the day, we have to also stop for a second and say, okay, but why? Why is the menorah so important? Beyond the how we do it, what is the symbol of the menorah? And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful symbol. Hanukkah is a lot about light, and light has an enormous symbolism. I would say in every religion. It's all about light, and as we are going to see, hopefully, if we have enough time, because it's one of the late slides that I have for you. Hanukkah is also all about being thankful, and how the two connect. Light and thanksgiving should connect, because one depends on the other. I would say the latter depends on the former. You will see why. Hello, Priscilla. You just came. You see, today I started early. You always had said, Rabbi, why don't you start the timer before 12? So I did it today by mistake, but I did it. So we have a chance to start a little bit earlier today. Okay, so let's begin with we have already people. Let's start with the class, and let's talk about the menorah. We know that we celebrate Hanukkah because the priest kindled the menorah back at the time when they re-entered to the temple. They clean it up. After they defeated the Greeks, they clean up the temple, and they were able, after a long time, to light the menorah once again. And then we took that symbol. But sometimes we forget what the menorah means to the Jewish people. The menorah is mentioned in the Torah, by the way. It's something that it has to be part of the temple. It was made out of gold. And it has 6 branches, so 3 and 1 in the middle. The Hanukkah, which is the Hanukkah menorah, had 2 more on the sides. So that's the difference. But they're coming from the same place. It's coming from the symbol of the menorah. What does the menorah mean? Well, let's study a little bit about that today. And you will see how it connects to Hanukkah, of course. So I want to bring to you, this is a verse from Leviticus that is talking about the menorah. And then the Talmud, this is from Masechet Shabbat, page 22b, is going to comment about that. The Torah says Aaron, which was Moses' brother, Aaron was the first high priest of Jewish people, shall arrange the menorah, where? Outside the curtain in the tent of the meeting. Hello, Michael Legoff. Chag Sameach to you. Good to see that you joined the class. So, and the Talmud is commenting about it by saying, and does God need the light of the menorah? Surely, all 40 years in the desert, the children of Israel only traveled by His light, the light of God. Rather, the menorah is testimony to the entire world that the divine presence rests on the Jewish people. Let's try to understand what the Talmud is saying here. Because when in Leviticus, when the Torah is commanding Aaron to have the menorah outside, basically what said outside is because it would be visible for everybody. There were certain things inside the tent of the meeting that nobody could see. That was private, like the Ark of the Covenant that was covered. But the menorah, the light has to be something that everybody should be able to see and to experience. Then in the temple there were windows, that so that you can experience the light of the menorah going out of the temple in some way. So the point is that the rabbis are asking, why do we need to put lights on the temple? Does God need light? God doesn't need us to light a light to illuminate God. Let's put it that way. So that doesn't make any sense. So the rabbis start thinking here. So if this light is not for the benefit of God, then it should be for our own benefit. For our own benefit. And not only that, it says something that this light that it was in the temple, it's something that it should be a reminder to us of the light of God shining for us during our lives. And that is something also that should be shared to other people. The fact that the light of God is always available for everybody. That's what it says. You know, when you have to understand sometimes when it says the divine presence rests on the Jewish people, this is something, it's not for us to keep. It's for us to share. We are a tool in the hands of God to spread that light to the entire world. Sometimes we forget about that and we believe that no, God's light is shining on us so we can feel so special and we can enjoy that light. That's not the idea. The idea is for us to reflect that light, in the sense that we acknowledge that that light exists, and then you can share it with others. But this is something that is opening a door, I believe, to a deeper and more profound principle here. And I will say it's all about the light and the mitzvot in general and the reason of why we have it. Because sometimes we feel that we do all this because of God. How can I explain this? Like, we fulfill mitzvot, we fulfill commandments because God needs those commandments to be fulfilled. It's almost like we are fueling God every time that we fulfill a commandment, right? But that's not true. we don't have any power to make God any better or any worse. God is God. God is infinite. So to pretend that we have any power on us to affect God, it's not true. Every commandment given to humanity was given for the sake of humanity, for our own sake. There is something for us, not something for God, because God doesn't need it. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So this is a beautiful example of what I'm trying to say here. So let me quote Rabbi Hanukkah Zundel ben Yosef. He said it beautifully. He said, well, God doesn't need the mitzvot, the same way that God doesn't need the Menorah. God gave us the mitzvot for the sake of improving ourselves, to guide us in the ways of uprightness and truth. So, every time you fulfill a commandment, you have to ask yourself, how is this mitzvah, how is this commandment making me any better? Sometimes could be something that is very obvious, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it needs a little bit of our involvement, our study, our understanding, our digging, our reflecting, our meditating, in order to understand how every commandment can make us better. Sometimes it's for ourselves, sometimes it's for society. That's why in Judaism we have basically two kinds of commandments. The one that they are logical, we call it mishpatim, and the one they are quote-unquote illogical, we call it chukim. It doesn't mean that they don't make any sense. It means that we have to dig a little deeper before we can understand it. That's the thing. So the menorah needs to be understood. It's something that is not something just pretty for us to look at the lights of the menorah. The menorah has a deeper meaning, and it's good for us to understand. But it's a good beginning if you understand that the light of the menorah is not for God's sake, it's for us, our sake. But now the question would be, if it's for our sake, why does it have to be in the temple? With everything that happens in the temple supposed to be something that is for God. We make the sacrifices for God. We go to the temple and we pray to God. So why the menorah in the temple? Why don't you put it outside? Well, I believe that putting the menorah in the temple is, in one way, an attempt for us to return God a little bit of the light that God gives us every day. We know that it's impossible. We know that at the end of the day it doesn't make any sense. God doesn't need the light. But nevertheless, we share that light with God. These kind of things that giving back even to God, what God gives us, is something that is very rooted in Judaism. It's something that we do, for example, when we give tzedakah. Back at the time of the temple was more obvious, when we had to give 10% of everything we earn back to the temple in an attempt to give that back to God, because we recognize that God is the source of blessing. And I know it doesn't make any sense. It's not that when you give it to the temple, it's not that you are actually physically giving anything to God, but it's a way to establishing a relationship. It's a way to acknowledge everything that God gives us, all the blessings that we receive. And the way we do it is by giving back to God in the same way that we give to others, even if that is symbolic, because God doesn't need it. One of the places that you can see this is in the liturgy, when we pray the Baruch in every service, where it says Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach. This is the prayer leader, usually the rabbi or the cantor, would say Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach. You will also hear this when somebody comes to bless the Torah. Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach. And then everybody else would say Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vaed. Remember that? So the first line, the leader will say, bless God, the blessed one. But also a mevorach could also be understood not just as the blessed one, but the one who blesses others. The blessor. I hope that's a word. The blessor, the one who gives you the blessing. So basically we said, blessed God, the source of blessing. Which do realize that technically doesn't make any sense to bless the name of God. God is the one who gives us blessing. God is the one that blesses us. What is this business of blessing the name of God? Well, again, it's part of this relationship that we build with God. In the same way that when you build a relationship with another human being, a relationship should never be take. A relationship is a back and forth. You take and you give. You take and you give. Sometimes you give because the other one doesn't have anything to give you, but the other person will give you, and that's a relationship. A relationship should never be single-sided. So every day, because we play the Baruch at least twice a day. And when we have the Torah reading, it's more than twice a day. It's a reminder that we bless the name of God, the source of blessing, because we return God the favor so we can strengthen our relationship with God. Shelly Chachinov, what do you say? You say because that light, the holy light. Yeah, but it's as I say, it's a symbol. It's a symbol. And Charlotte said Chag Hanukkah Sameach, and she wrote it in Hebrew. For those of you who don't read Hebrew and you want to know what Charlotte typed there, welcome to the class, Charlotte. Okay, so that's what I wanted to mention. This back and forth, this strong relationship that we build with God every day is also present in Hanukkah. We light the menorah, this light that we return to God, because it's an attempt for us to strengthen that relationship. Now, on top of that, the concept of light is very important. It's very important. To the point that the Midrash in Bereshit Rabbah said that the word light is written 5 times in the first paragraph of the Torah. Okay? Go to Bereshit, go to the beginning of the Torah, you will find that the word or, light, appears 5 times. And why is that? Because it corresponds to the 5 books of Torah. So what do you think that means? What do you think that means? That every book of the Torah is a symbol of light. If you have an idea, please type it in the chat. And I will tell you what I think it is. I believe that the Torah in general is light. And every book of the Torah is a special kind of light that is added to this general equation. And light is something very important. Think about your own life. Think about your daily life. Think about your routine. Think about humanity in general, how people used to live when creating or generating light was a challenge, versus in this generation where we have incredibly easy access to light. I'm talking about physical light. How light changed our lives. Because when you have light, everything is easier. When you're at night, in these days, it's we don't even think about it. We go to the switch, we turn it on, and we enjoy the light. We can do many things. But what happened when there is a blackout? There is no electricity. You cannot turn the light. It's a disaster. We don't know what to do unless you keep like a flashlight or a candle or something. But if you don't have that, if you don't have that light, you will be very dysfunctional. There will be many things that you won't be able to do. You will have to be extra careful, especially if you live in my house. I have so many things that if I have a blackout, I won't be able to see anything. I was actually once doing a concert for WEN Sector, which is an organization here in Winnipeg, and the lights went off. And I'm in the basement. I know you can't see that from home, but I'm streaming from my basement. I have a very fancy streaming studio, but it's in the basement, so I have no windows, no nothing. So when the lights went off, it took me an extra minute to get out of my studio because I have all the cables and everything. Without the light, I couldn't see a thing. Thank goodness. Then I remember that I have my phone, so I used the flashlight from my phone and I found my way out. But light, it's very important. Very important. Now, the other thing that we have to acknowledge is that not every source of light is the same. And I can give you another analogy with my fancy streamings, or with my studio. It took me close to a month, or even longer, to find the right kind of lights, and then to balance all the lights and the angle, etc., to get a decent image for the camera. Then I realized not all the lights are the same. The light cannot be too blue or too yellow or too white. It has to be, you need to put what it's called a soft box, that it will be a soft light. Otherwise, you will have these white spots on your face, and my head would start shining too much. Even though you can see a little bit of shine there, it's because what kind of light you use matters. And for different situations, you need different kind of lights. You will say, no, the brighter the light, the better. Not really. Because if you're a photographer and you still want to develop the old-style film, you know that white light won't work. You have to switch to red light in that situation so you can develop your film. So different light will be appropriate for different moments. And that's why I believe it says that the 5 books of Torah, each one represent a different kind of light, because it will guide us in different ways. It's not the same, the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis, that is talking about mainly family issues, family tensions, jealousy, etc. The book of Exodus, that is talking about freedom, is talking about human rights, etc. The book of Leviticus, that is going to talk about religious matters, is going to talk about a relationship with God, and so forth. Every book of the Torah is unique, and every book of the Torah shines with a special type of light, and each one is necessary in our lives. That's why the Talmud will say that all those that utilize the light of the Torah sustains them. You can't make this any more clear. The light of the Torah is sustaining you, is guiding you, it's helping you in the same way that when you turn on the light at home, is helping you navigate things at home, at work, at school, to know where you go and to avoid obstacles. That's why light is so important. And sometimes we forget the importance of the light and how the light of the Torah should be the one guiding us in our lives. Because this is the thing, as I mentioned, there are different kind of lights. How do you know what kind of light to use? Well, sometimes you go to the experts, and the experts will tell you what kind of light you need. When I started to stream, I tried to watch some YouTube videos, and it was very confusing. Some people, then later I learned that they call themselves experts and gurus, but they know nothing. All they want is your money. They have no clue what they are talking about. But then I went here in Winnipeg to talk to a local expert about light. And this person taught me a lot about what kind of light to use, and then I improved lots of things around. But there are many lights. If some people will recommend you the wrong one, it's going to be a disaster. The camera won't work well. I cannot use a green screen because I will have to mark reflection. So that's why to be guided and to get used to use the right kind of light is something very important, to the point that the rabbis added it to the prayers. The rabbis added a prayer that we say every day, in which we ask God to guide us with the right light. Now we are talking about spiritual issues, spiritual matters, real life. The right light, that's why we say every day, V'ha'er eineinu v'toratecha, v'dabek liveinu v'mitzvotecha, Brighten our eyes in your Torah. That's the translation. But if you read the Hebrew, V'ha'er eineinu betoratecha, it basically means illuminate our eyes with the light of your Torah. So in other words, we are acknowledging that there are different kind of lights in the world, different kind of advice, right? Different kind of messages that they are competing to tell us what to do and how to live our lives. Each one of those messages present themselves as the light. Everybody that discovered these messages, when you believe them, then you consider yourself illuminated. You're illuminated with all that. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? When we believe that the good light comes from the Torah, and we want God to help us to receive that light without any interferences, because it's a light that is very easy to contaminate, and then it's not a pure light anymore. So we ask God every day, brighten our eyes in your Torah, and that's it, in your Torah, and fasten our hearts to your rules. But you see, the second line, fasten our hearts to your rules, comes only after you receive the light of Torah. When you receive the light of Torah, when it's like any other light, you can see clearly. Now you can see why the rules, the commandments, the mitzvot are good for us. If you don't have the light of the Torah, you cannot see that. Everything will sound and look crazy. What is that you do, Jews? You keep kosher? Really? Observe Shabbat? Come on. Well, that if you look at Judaism with the wrong lens and with the wrong light. But if you look at Judaism through the lenses of the Torah and the light of the Torah, then all of a sudden you can see clearly how all these commandments make sense and they are beneficial to you. So that's why the order of the words here is: first, illuminate our eyes with the Torah. Second, we're going to fulfill your commandments, because now we understand. Everything is crystal clear to me. And then again, everything else is a consequence of that. Unite our hearts to love and revere your name, because now we understand. And we shall never be ashamed. It's a beautiful concept. Beautiful, beautiful concept to understand all this. But now, what does this have to do with Hanukkah? Well, let's bring a comment here from a rabbi. And I said, the miracle of Hanukkah comes to instruct the Jews of all generation before the start of the long exile. For the menorah and the candles symbolize Torah, as it says, and Torah is light. In other words, we know that we live in exile. 2,000 years ago, the temple was destroyed for the second time. We lost the second temple. And we lost the land of Israel for 2,000 years. We still don't have the temple. So, in other words, what Rabbi Kotler is saying here, that Hanukkah is a wonderful tool. It was a gift from God, because Hanukkah was instituted by the rabbis way before the destruction of the second temple. So it was a gift from God to have an opportunity of once a year to get a message that it will be able to illuminate the way during the exile. Because exile in Judaism is also called a time of darkness. Darkness in the sense of confusion. It's very difficult to be a Jew outside Israel. And it's a fact. It's very difficult. If you've never been to Israel, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. But if you go to Israel, if you want to live a Jewish life, it's ridiculously easy. You have kosher things everywhere. Restaurants, grocery stores. You want to study Torah? You have thousands of options to do that. You want to go to synagogue? In every corner there is a synagogue. You don't want to work On Shabbat or on holidays, not a problem. Nobody works. So it's easy. But if you live outside, it's dark. So you need extra light to help you navigate those situations and to remain genuinely Jewish. And that's why it's so important to understand and to perceive that light. And the Rabbi, at least Rabbi Kotler, is saying is that Hanukkah is an incredible tool to achieve just that. Yeah, Shelley, I agree with you. You go to Israel, it's all around, everywhere. Yeah. I miss Israel a lot, and with I hope if one day this pandemic is over, to go there with my son, so he can experience that as well. Yeah. Let's continue reading about the menorah and the symbol of light, because at the end of the day, this is a lesson about Hanukkah. So, another opinion, Rabbi Eliyahu Kitov, he said, whenever the Torah or the sages refers to the oil used to light the menorah, an illusion is intended to the wisdom of the hearts and the thoughts of the mind. Oh, pay attention to this. This is an amazing text. Pay attention. When the Greeks entered the holy temple and defiled the oil, they blemish the thoughts and feelings of the majority of the people of Israel, who began to accept that the wisdom of the Greeks contained enduring reality. When the Hasmoneans entered the sanctuary, they found only one jar that contained pure oil, an amount sufficient for one day's lightning. Despite all that the Greeks had done to defile the thoughts of the people of Israel, there still remained a modicum of light in their hearts, a single spark of true wisdom. Oh, let me explain this in a minute, but Keridwen, you have a comment here. Let's see what you wrote. You said, I remember when I was in grade 9, my classmate handed me a drawing of a swastika and the teacher didn't even do anything. He was the only Jewish person in the entire school. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to be a Jew in the diaspora. Absolutely. And that's a perfect example. Thank you for sharing. So, back to the text, what this rabbi is saying, I think is brilliant. It's brilliant. Because now what he's saying is, we are not only talking about the menorah as a symbol of light, but we are also talking about the fuel of the menorah. You understand? The oil that it was used. Because this is what happened. And this is a confusion. I talk to many people and they get confused with this. When the Jews entered back to the temple at the time of the story of Hanukkah, it's not that they couldn't find any oil. They found, in fact, lots of oil, but it was only one jar of kosher oil. What the Greeks did before they lost the war was purposely to contaminate all the oil of the temple. Now, I know this is factually very difficult to prove, but what I think is that if the rabbis took the time to build a story around the fact that the Greeks defiled or contaminated the oil, is because there is a message there. There is a message there. And it's the fact that the light, in this case, let's say the light of the Torah, could also be contaminated. And it's a fact that something could be presented to you as Torah, but in reality is not. It looks like Torah, it feels like Torah, but it's not Torah. So this is the same. When the priest entered back to the temple, they found the oil. It looked like oil. They would physically will be the same of the kosher oil, but it was not. It was not kosher. And they knew it. They knew it. And that's why they didn't use that oil. In fact, the only oil they used was that little jar of oil containing pure oil. And what happened was a miracle. That little jar actually was enough to burn for 8 days. In other words, this is also something that speaks to each one of us. Many of us discovered Judaism at one time in our lives, some sooner than others. I didn't grow up in a religious household, and I didn't discover many things about Judaism until, how old was I? I started with the preparation of my bar mitzvah, but that was very limited. And then in high school, I have some religious classmates that they guided me a little further so I could access to other teachers, and I learned more and more, and it was a wonderful thing. But what took me to have a bar mitzvah and what took me to explore Judaism a little bit more was the fact that I still had this little jar of pure oil within myself. It's not that everything was contaminated. It's not that everything was defiled. It's not that I didn't have any more Torah within me. I still have that little jar. And I guess it did depend on me that I decided to, quote unquote, use that oil to light that candle to see what happened. And who knew? It wasn't just something that you will burn for a day and then it will be gone. No, it was also something that kept burning to this day. And I felt that my Judaism was strengthening, and my relationship with God became stronger and stronger, and everything started with that kind of little jar of pure oil that it was not contaminated, and I still have it inside me, and I never knew. And I'm pretty sure that each one of you goes through the same thing. Some of you are closer to Judaism than others, but doesn't matter, because that pure oil is still inside you. And if you are bold enough to use it, then it will take you to a place that you don't even imagine. But you have to be bold like the Hasmoneans and to go for that little jar that you still have within yourself. Shelley, what do you say? You say it grows within you. Yeah, it will. It will. So, let's keep talking about this. There are more things about Hanukkah that they are very interesting. I don't know if you realize that Hanukkah is usually compared to Purim. Both are post-biblical, Purim and Hanukkah. Remember Purim with masquerades, and we read the Megillah, we eat Omentashen, right? But they're both the same. But the difference is there is no book for Hanukkah. On Purim, we read the Megillah Esther. But on Hanukkah, the book of the Maccabees was never canonized. The book of the Maccabees did not make it to the Jewish Bible. It does. It's part of the Catholic Bible. It's part of their Old Testament, but it's not part of the Jewish Bible. The rabbis decided that the book of the Maccabees were not kosher. In fact, I think that they weren't even written in Hebrew. I believe they were written in Greek, the book of the Maccabees, and they were not historically accurate, so they decided not to incorporate them. So in other words, both Hanukkah and Purim are post-biblical, but they have some differences. Purim contains a book, Hanukkah does not. Hanukkah does not have a Megillah, and that's not in minor things. And there is something that the rabbis try to explain of why Hanukkah does not have a Megillah. And you will see that the rabbis understand that the Hanukkah should not have a Megillah because of what Hanukkah symbolizes beyond the light. And actually, it's not beyond the light, it's related to the light. We'll see. Let's read it. Now, the Holy Ark represents the written Torah. Now, this rabbi is describing the temple. Okay? And you will see. The temple, remember, they had this private thing that it was the Holy Ark was there, and inside the Holy Ark was the tablet of the law at the beginning, and then the first written Torah was put in there. The Torah written by Moses was put in there, but nobody could see that. That was inside the Sanctus Sanctorum, the Holy of Holies. The Menorah was outside, so people could see the light, remember? Okay, so the Holy Ark represents the written Torah. But the menorah represents the oral Torah. When I say oral Torah in these days, I'm talking about the Talmud, the Mishnah, the Gemara, the Talmud. That is the oral law. Okay, let's go back. The Holy Ark represents the written Torah, but the menorah represents the oral Torah, the Talmud. The Sinaitic teachings, which flow from and illuminates the otherwise impenetrable Torah text. So this is very interesting, because here we already have a clue. It says that the oral law is important because without the oral law, it's like trying to read the Torah without a lamp. When you want to read the Torah, you need some kind of light so you can actually read it. So without the oral law, without the interpretation of the oral law, the Torah is obscure. It's a word that is used all the time when we talk about biblical texts. The text is too obscure for me to understand. Of course, because you are trying to read it without the proper light, which is represented by the rabbinic teachings that come from the oral law, the Talmud. Let's keep reading. This is indicated by the design of the menorah itself. The menorah has 6 branches that flow out of a central pillar, corresponding to the 6 orders of the Mishnah. The Mishnah, remember, the first part of the Talmud are 6 books, which flow out of the Torah text. There is a fundamental difference between the written Torah and the oral Torah, and the Ark and the menorah express this difference. The Ark is sealed in the Holy of Holies and is untouchable by man. The same can be said of the Torah text. Its words are eternal and unchanging. When it comes to the oral Torah, however, man has an active role to play. God gives man the sacred task of interpreting Torah verses within the framework of tradition and determining how to apply halachic principle to the changing realities of life. Moreover, in order for a teacher to successfully transmit the oral Torah to his students, contemporary and innovative language must be used. Using the oral Torah, we bring Judaism to life. And this is a beautiful thing. So you will also see here, and I will give you the spoiler here, that if Hanukkah represents the oral law, Hanukkah cannot have a book, something that is written. Hanukkah is comprised mostly of oral tradition, and it does not have anything written down, because that will be against the spirit of Hanukkah, because Hanukkah represents oral law. It's a beautiful thing. That's why it's a difference with let's see, Michael, what you said, Michael Legov. We studied dedication of the temple during Hanukkah. Well, it's not that we studied about the dedication of the temple, but if you come to synagogue every day of Hanukkah, we read about the dedication of the first tabernacle in the desert, which was the portable temple. That's the Torah reading of every day of Hanukkah. We don't read the weekly parsha during the week. We read specifically texts from the Torah about the dedication of the first tabernacle, because at the end of the day, Hanukkah is the rededication of the temple. So that's why when we study about the dedication of the temple and so forth, I hope that's clear. Shelley, you said, were they questioning where or not the miracle happened? But you see how this is irrelevant if the miracle is a factual thing, because what the rabbis tried to teach was a general principle for us to be inspired by the story of Hanukkah. The story of Hanukkah presents something that no other holiday represents, which is a celebration of rabbinic tradition. Celebration of rabbinic tradition is something unique. It's something unique to Hanukkah. So the other, we know that Hanukkah is a celebration of rabbinic tradition, when you will see that, for example, what is the Talmud says, what is the blessing recited upon the lighting of the Hanukkah candles? What blessing do we say when we light the Hanukkah candles? We say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu leadlik ner shel Hanukkah. Okay? Which basically translates to something like, blessed are you, God, our God, King of the universe, who has commanded us to light the Hanukkah candles. And so, whoa, hold on a minute, right there, hold a minute. Where in the Torah God commanded us to light the Hanukkah candles? It's not coming from the Torah. So why does it say in the blessing that we use that God commanded us to light the Hanukkah, to light the Hanukkah Menorah? Good question. That's why the Talmud explains. Where is the biblical source of this command? Again, Hanukkah observance was legislated during the Second Temple period. How can there be a biblical basis for its commemoration? Duh. So, Rav Avia said, from the verse, do not deviate from the things they tell you. They, in this context, is talking about the rabbis. Rav Nehemiah, said, it's coming from a different verse. From the verse saying, ask your father, and he will tell you. Ask your elders, and they will tell you. Elders in this context is talking about the rabbis. In other words, that the Talmud understand that the Torah is empowering the rabbis to also create mitzvot on God's behalf. So that's why this is something, the Hanukkah, that is 100% rabbinical, but the blessing implies that is God's will for us to celebrate Hanukkah. And that's why I say that the Menorah is a daily reminder of the beauty of rabbinic Judaism. Shelley, why you say here? Said, I get that. What I don't get is why they did not include it in separate books. Perhaps because it was written in Greek, not Aramaic or Hebrew. No, I think they didn't like it. If you read the book of Maccabees, I did it once. There are 3, I believe, and each one is different from each other, and they're presenting the story a different way. They just didn't like it. They just didn't like what was written in those books, so it was not included. It was not included in the Torah. Now, we talk about light, which is also interesting, is what Rashi says about Hanukkah. And I believe it's also a consequence of the concept of light. When Rashi said Hanukkah was established entirely for the sake of gratitude. How is gratitude connected to light? And it's, how is Hanukkah also a festival of gratitude? Where is that present in Hanukkah? Well, if you go to the Siddur, the paragraph that we read every day in the Amidah, it will make it very clear that it's a festival of gratitude. When we say, and we thank you, God, for the miracles, for the redemption, for the mighty deeds, for the saving acts, and for the wonders which you have wrought for us, for our ancestors in those days at this time. In the days of Matityahu, the son of Yohanan the high priest, the Hasmonean, and his sons. So we are grateful to God for all the miracles that happened in Hanukkah. And the interesting thing is, the only way for us to recognize the hand of God and the events of Hanukkah is to be able to see the hand of God in the world. And remember, to be able to see God, you need the right kind of light. The right kind of light. And there are many things, I don't know if you ever noticed that there are certain things that if you don't have the right kind of light, you won't be able to see. But as soon as you have the right kind of light, the right color, the right frequency of the light, you can see certain things. And you will see that, for example, there are certain things that it could be seen only with infrared light. Otherwise, you won't be able to see it, because you won't be able to penetrate a wall or other things. So you need specific kind of lights to be able to see certain things. When you have the right light, in this case, the light of Torah, as reminded us by the Menorah, then and only then you can see God in the world. Without the light of Torah, you cannot see God. And you will struggle to recognize God in your life, and you will struggle to see the hand of God in the world. And that's the beauty of Torah studying. That it happens to me. The more Torah you study, the more of the Torah light that you absorb, and the more that light will allow you to discover God, and the more that light will allow you to establish and to strengthen a relationship with God. And Michael, you said, it is therefore also fair to argue that the Hanukkah is not really a Hag. Oh, no, it is. It is a Hag. It was a Hag, but it was instituted by the rabbis. In Judaism, we have, remember I mentioned before that we have the Mishpatim and Chukim, two different categories of commandments, of mitzvot. Mishpatim, the logical one, Chukim, the illogical ones. Okay, that's true, but also we can split all the commandments that we have into two other categories. There is the Oraita and the Rabbanan, things that came from the Torah and things that came from the rabbis, but both are equally important to us, and we are bound by both. It's not that we should obey the one from the Torah and we should not obey the one from the rabbis. The only difference, and the rabbi established this, is that when you are, you can be more lenient towards something that was established by the rabbis, and the tradition is be more stringent when there is something that is coming straight from the Torah. But other than that, they're both obligatory. They're both mitzvot. And Michael, you have I see. Meaning a pilgrimage festival. Yes, it's not a pilgrimage festival. It's not a festival, it's a holiday. I know what you mean. Yeah, technically it shouldn't be called Chag if you use Chag only for Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur. Yes, but it's still a mandatory holiday in Judaism. I understand what you're saying now. I understand. So again, the light of Hanukkah should lead us to be thankful for everything we have, and to be thankful for the presence of God in our lives. And I have one more text for you to talk about this. This is from Rabbi Chaim Friedlander, and he says the focal point of Hanukkah is giving thanks. As Rashi states, Hanukkah was established entirely for the sake of gratitude. Our sages therefore inserted the prayer of Alanissim in the Amidah. That's the one that I read for you before. And the Amidah, blessing of thanks. The word Hoda'ah, meaning thanks, can be understood in two ways. Number one, to acknowledge the truth. And number two, to give thanks. These are both connected. Mankind, who receives life, health, sustenance, and all of other needs from God, must acknowledge. First, you have to acknowledge that everything we have is in fact a gift from God. And then you can be thankful for that. And we should never forget that we are all Jews. The Hebrew word for Jew is Yehudi. We are Yehudim, because we come from the word Yehudah, but Yehudah comes from the word Odaha, which means thank. So a Yehudi should always be thankful, especially to God. And there is a reminder every year for Hanukkah, when the light of the Menorah can help us, hopefully, to see more clearly and to be able to experience in a different way the presence of God. So, this is what I had to present to you. I can't believe I covered all the slides in almost exactly 1 hour. So, thank you everyone for coming today to study Torah with me. And it was great to have you. It's great to study a little bit more about Hanukkah before the holiday is over. I hope you got something out of this class. And remember, Torah L'chaim is going to be rebroadcast tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time if you wanna play it again. If not, if you wanna catch it live, well, next week you have another chance. Next Thursday at noon, hopefully we are going to go back to study the weekly Parsha, and we can enlighten a little bit more with more light coming from the Torah. Thank you so much for being there. Hello, Sarah B. Welcome. I didn't know that you were there. Thank you so much for being here. Remember, if you're in Winnipeg, you can come in person this Sunday at 3:30. We have a special Hanukkah celebration in the synagogue. And if you're not in Winnipeg, or if you're in Winnipeg, you don't feel comfortable going to in-person things yet, you can also watch the concert. We are going to have a little Hanukkah concert with Leslie Emery. We have Jay Stoller playing the hand drums, and Kerry Nagy playing the violin. I will be playing the piano. It will be a beautiful, short Hanukkah concert, mostly oriented for kids, but I'm pretty sure all of you are going to enjoy it very much. This Sunday at 3:30, special celebration at the Shaarey Zedek. Hope to see you either in person or online. Thank you so much for being there. Stay safe. Happy Hanukkah to all of you. I hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone.